Hello, and welcome to the Being Human podcast, where we explore what it means to truly be human, physically, mentally, and spiritually. We upload an episode of this podcast every single week, so hit that subscribe button. You do not want to miss any of these episodes. The Being Human podcast is now brought to you by Grappler's Coffee. Grappler's Coffee is absolutely tremendous. You should be consuming at least some caffeine on a regular basis, and when you do, you want to make sure you're consuming it the right way. Grappler's Coffee is an outstanding coffee. It's going to improve your performance on the mats. It says drink half a cup before flow rolling, 1 cup before 6 a.m. open mat, or 2 cups to wrist lock, punch choke, and oil check everyone into oblivion. Who doesn't want to be getting more oil checks on the mats? If you're a grappler, you should be consuming Grappler's Coffee. How do you do so? Head over to mrbassets.com now and use the code WAG10 for 10% off your order. And make sure to pick up a bar of Grappler's soap whilst you're there. On this episode of the podcast, I sat down with Kevin Webb. Kev is a BJJ black belt under Braulio Estima. Kev trained with Braulio from day one of his BJJ journey, right up to black belt. He was Braulio's number one, so to speak. He travelled around with Braulio a great deal, training and competing. He's competed and won at a very high level. He's got some big accomplishments under his belt as a competitor. He still competes now, but really his focus is on coaching. He's got a large stable of black belts under him, including, of course, my coach, Joe Taylor. We talked about Kev's career, competing and coaching. We talked about the evolution of the sport. I asked Kev, how young do you need to start training if you want a realistic shot of becoming world champ, if you want to compete at the highest level and win at the highest level in this sport? I asked him how to deal with competition nerves, adrenaline dumps. We went all into competition mindset, how to prepare for comps. I asked him how often you should be competing. Should you have an on-season and off-season, or should you be looking to compete as much as possible? I asked him for his ADCC predictions. Who does he see winning the divisions? What themes are we going to see in terms of technique and meta? Kev is very perceptive. He sees the wood from the trees when it comes to grappling. And as a result, he shared a great deal of wisdom throughout this episode. I do not doubt you will enjoy and find value in it. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up, drop a comment below, share it around on social media, and hit that subscribe button as well. Thank you for watching, thank you for listening, and thank you for supporting Being Human. When did you start training? What was your first experience with jiu-jitsu, and why did you start training?
I started my martial arts journey in the pre-UFC before we actually knew what worked. So I'd done a shitload of other martial arts beforehand. The first exposure I got to jiu-jitsu was UFC 4. I had a VHS video that I saw in the DVD shop. I didn't know he'd heard of UFC. I hadn't really made it over here at the time. And I thought it was fake. I thought it was like, this can't be real. It's like a wrestling video or something like that. It's going to be a load of bullshit. And obviously, UFC 4 was the good one as well, because that's the one where Hoyce is fighting for like 15 minutes on the bottom, like you think he's going to lose in the final, and then he chokes him out with a triangle choke. And like, so then I started desperately looking for jiu-jitsu, and you couldn't find it anywhere in this country at the time, really, especially in the Midlands. Maurizio was over here, but I was too young to be driving like all the way over to Birmingham from where I live. So I was doing JKD at the time as well. So there was a little bit of jiu-jitsu in that. That was kind of the closest thing. There was a little bit of grappling going on. So that was the first exposure to jiu-jitsu. And then I was a little bit older, and Braulio came over. Because Maurizio had left Birmingham by the time I was trying to find jiu-jitsu. So when Braulio came over, I'd already been grappling a bit. I thought it was pretty good. And then obviously got a chance to meet Braulio, and I just thought that's what all brown belts were like as well. So you train with Braulio Estima and you think, that BJJ black belts are like legit. Whereas I didn't realise quite how good he was compared to everybody else. But yeah, that's essentially it.
So what was that first memory like, meeting Braulio? Was that at the gym in Birmingham?
Yeah, Stevie B's in Birmingham, yeah. It was ridiculous. So, I mean, I'd essentially spent my whole life looking for what you saw in the movies. Someone that could literally like throw you effortlessly. Someone that could literally, treat you like a child, essentially. And Braulio did that. He was doing these helicopter arm bars. He was lifting me up. He was flipping me all over the place. It was just unbelievable. So I essentially quit everything I was doing literally the next day and trained full-time with Braulio. I trained, every day.
Just on the spot like that?
Yeah. I mean, I was obsessed with martial arts, but I'd never, ever done anything. I mean, again, like the kids are brought up now. MMA is like mainstay, like, but you didn't get that. So like there was loads of martial arts around, but it was taekwondo and karate and aikido, and you didn't know which one worked. And you know, Steven Seagal looked legit as fuck in the movies. So like, and everything was a little bit unimpressive, and they wouldn't spar. You know, but straight away Braulio's like calling everyone over to spar with him. You know, lines everybody up, and you know, would take on 20 people on the mat in one session quite happily, just one after the other. You know, everybody fresh waiting to roll with him. You know, it's just unbelievable. And yeah, I mean, just hooked from day one, really. And there were other guys there as well, so I thought it was pretty good when I went there. But it wasn't just Braulio; it was the blue belts as well that were like, you know, nothing like what Braulio was doing to me, but that were running rings around me as well. And I was like, yeah, this has got to be learned quick because this is embarrassing, like, you know. So that was surreal experience.
How old were you at that point, and how many years of martial arts did you have under your belt?
Probably been training martial arts for about 15 years before that. I must have been 22, 24, which is pretty old to be starting jiu-jitsu. So by the time you get to black belt, I think, I can't remember now, it's so long ago. I've had my black belt for nearly 14 years. So yeah, I think I was about 30, something like that, maybe 28, 30 when I got my black belt. So yeah, I'd got quite a few years of martial arts experience beforehand, but not the good stuff.
Yeah, so as you said, that's I suppose even then was considered like an older age to start the sport.
No, not really. I mean, I was only 24, but I was pursuing it like a professional almost. I was literally I worked as a postman, so I could get up only a part-time postman. I'd be finished at 10 o'clock. Then literally straight in the car, straight over to Braulio's for the day class, train 2 hours with Braulio, spend all day with Braulio. So if he went off teaching privates and things, I'd go along with him a lot of the time and get to learn that way. He'd obviously bring over Brazilians as well. So there was his brother, there was Otavio, there was like numerous other guys we'd spend all day with and just wait around to the evening class. It was pointless driving all the way back home because it was like a 2 hour round trip to get there and back. So yeah, I mean, yeah, not really old on the grand scheme of things, but way too old. Like world champions are generally between sort of 20 and 25. You know, if you're not a world champion by that age, it's going to be a tough gig to get it. You know, you see the slightly older grapplers still doing pretty well, but they were, you know, when you look at when they won their first world title, they were kind of in their early 20s normally. It's quite a young man's game.
Well, that's what I was going to ask today. When do you think is like the latest somebody can start for them to, you know, have a good chance at winning ADCC trials, going on to compete at ADCC?
I mean, ADCC is slightly different because no-gi, and I love no-gi. You know, we offer more no-gi classes here than anything, but there's no getting away from the fact that it is slightly easier to get better at no-gi. You have to be more skilled. There's no question about it. You have to be more skillful to get good at the gi. That doesn't mean you don't have to be skillful no-gi. You can just get there a little bit quicker, which has got its own issues attached to it because obviously people get their black belts really quick based on their no-gi performance. So that it's really difficult to say. I mean, we've not seen anybody yet kind of start jiu-jitsu late and win an ADCC world title, you know, and my predictions for this time round, you know, they're all young guns. You know, your Fabricio Andres, your Mika Galvaos, you know, your Bill Tackett, those guys, Andrew Tackett, they're all youngsters. They're all like, you know, some of them are teenage, you know. Nicky Ryan feels like he's been around for ages and he's still only like 22. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. It's like he's considered like an older grappler now. You're kind of used to seeing him there for the last sort of 7-8 years, you know. So it's so hard now. Realistically, I think if you haven't begun jiu-jitsu kind of pre-puberty almost, you know what I mean? You've got to have that cycle of kind of like being a teenager into a young man. I think you're going to be struggling.
Yeah,
which is really hard because you've got kids in here and you're trying to get across to them that like, yeah, you're only 11, but you still don't realise your window of opportunity is opened now and it's going to close in 8-9 years time, you know. And if you're not doing the work hard now, you have to have essentially made it by the time you're sort of 15, 16. You've already got to be competitive with everybody in your gym because that's just a little micro environment, isn't it? Does that make sense? If you're not you're not good in the gym, then you've got no chance on a world stage. So yeah, I think if you're not beating most of the adults in the gym at age sort of 16, 17, you're probably not going to make it, because you're competing against kids that have been training since 4. There's so much jiu-jitsu now that it's going to be really tough.
Well, that's it. It's accelerated so rapidly, hasn't it? And I've been making this point now for a while, that like I see it basically it's going to the same place as football, where before you could start jiu-jitsu in your late teens, early 20s, and still be able to compete at a high level, still be professional.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah.
But now that's off the cards.
I think maybe nogi you could have done that, but I don't think
not in the gi.
Not in the gi really. When you look back at it, it was still dominated by people it was dominated by all Brazilians, and all of those started when they were really young. The difference has changed now. The fact that jiu-jitsu has been around a few other countries like America, in Europe now, for sort of 20 or so years, 20, 30 years. So you've got this next generation that have started super young, starting now.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Now it seems like it's going to be the same place as football, where if you don't start from when you're 4 years old and continually train all the way through childhood, all the way through life, then you're not going to have a chance.
It's going to be tough, yeah, for sure.
So talk to me about your early years of training under Braulio. Joe always tells me about your kind of baptism of fire as a blue belt. He said that Braulio not held you back from your purple belt, but he said that you did incredibly well as a blue belt. You won so many tournaments, so many competitions, and at one point you even thought, does Braulio even like me, because he hadn't given you your purple belt yet? Talk me through those blue belt years, all your competitions, all your training.
Yeah, so I got my blue belt pretty quick. And I don't know whether he thought he'd given it me too quickly. I don't know what his logic was. He seemed literally, as soon as I got my purple belt, seemed to lower his standards like literally the next day. But yeah, I mean, I think so. Back then we had what was called Seni, which was like the European Championships. The IBJJF Europeans didn't exist. There were so few competitions. So this competition was the big one. Jude Samuel used to run it. And essentially you were the European champion if you'd won that. You were the best guy in Europe. And I think I won the blue belt one 3 times in a row. I think the last time I won it, I'm pretty sure I had sort of 5 fights, and I reckon I was on the mat for less than 2 minutes, something like that. It was ridiculous. But Braulio wanted me to go to do international competitions. So that was what he was holding me back for. I think he wanted me to, go to the Pan Ams, do the World. But I just couldn't afford it at the time. I look back now and I think probably I could have done more to try and afford it, but it was difficult. It's expensive to go and compete unless you're getting sponsored and stuff like that. So I didn't compete internationally as much as I probably should have done. So yeah, he kind of held me back a little bit.
And then, so was that kind of like the pinnacle in terms of accomplishments at blue belt? What was it called? Sorry, the Senai?
The Senai, yeah. Well, I did the Pan Americans at blue belt as well. I won bronze in the Pan Americans. I lost in the semi-final by a takedown as I pulled guard. So literally pulling guard and they flick your ankle. And I think I had something like 10 advantages. But the guy was a D1 wrestler. So I kept like flipping him over and he'd just get back to his knees. He was really hard to sweep. So yeah, I think that cost me that title. But yeah, and then kind of the big titles I won. So we had the FILA Nationals as well, which was like, so went to go and represent the UK for the World Championships again. That was another big competition. That kind of, that would be like the same as the ADCC trials is now. And I did the trials a couple of times as well, back in the day, and did all right in those. Again, just getting pipped at the post in the kind of like semi-finals in the first one I did. And I think I went out in the quarters in the next one I did. But I was only a blue belt at the time doing those, I think. Purple, I can't remember. It's a long time ago.
And then after that, moving on from there, what was the journey like? What were you competing gi and no gi, or just in the gi?
Yeah, more in the gi, but yeah, no gi, no gi. Just doing the local tournaments. So I had a stroke in 2010, and that kind of so the plan was to get to brown belt and then start going into MMA. That was kind of what my goal always was with it. but that kind of put the kibosh on that a little bit. So yeah, just a lot of local tournaments. Didn't do too many kind of internationals. Did the Feeler Worlds, did the Pan Americans, but not too much more than that.
And in terms of the actual game itself, both in gi and no gi, what was the game like at that time? What were the prominent styles? Yeah, had leg locks even begun to come in yet?
No, I've seen a couple of the revolutions come in. So if you look, you can see it. Like you look back at like Roger's reign and Braulio's reign when they were doing their thing. Still very much like you wouldn't massively be able to tell the difference, but there were significant things like the berimbolo was a big one that kind of changed the way that a lot of people play jiu-jitsu. So I mean, it was still good basic jiu-jitsu because we seem to have come back to that a little bit now. If you watch the way that Gordon's still winning matches, he's still getting on top, passing, taking the back, choking them out. You see a lot of these like little fad things come in. Spider guard was the one when I was like brand new to it. This was kind of new, and people were starting to kind of investigate into this a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say there was like massive difference in the jiu-jitsu. The baseline jiu-jitsu is always going to remain the same. But yeah, there's just these big. It's almost like singular ideas that come into it and kind of make the game like you have like a 2-year window where if you don't know that, then everybody can jump ahead. So everybody goes, "Oh, you've got to learn berimbolos. You're just going to lose," which is kind of the case. But once the bubble bursts on that a little bit, it seems to kind of almost return back to its default setting of just normal jiu-jitsu.
It's like the stock market, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's a big explosion of something, but then once the bubble pops, the market
back to normal, yeah. But in jiu-jitsu, it's like there's just the new things there, but it's not a case of if you know how to do a berimbolo, you're going to win anymore. It's just like you can still specialize in that, but people are very good at countering them now. And the same with the leg locks. Leg locks has gone through a couple of things, so it's kind of massively in. Then it kind of started to fade away. It's actually made a bit of a resurgence again now. You're seeing a lot of people winning again by leg lock because there's some new ideas with those. Then everybody will learn it and it will kind of fade away again.
So what do you think is the next bubble, the next iteration, the next big trends?
Well, the takedown thing's happening at the moment. And that's a really positive thing for jiu-jitsu. I've hated for so long that jiu-jitsu just become this really ridiculous thing that was so far away. I think back in like, if you're looking like 96, 97, 98, around that sort of time, if you went to MMA and you were a BJJ black belt, people were like fucking hell, be careful on the ground. You're definitely going to get submitted. I think nowadays, if you told someone you're a BJJ black belt, if you've done MMA your whole life, that's not going to faze you one little bit. And if you were a world champion in jiu-jitsu or you were one of the greats, you did well in MMA. Whereas now you could take a world champion in BJJ and there's absolutely no guarantee they're going to do very well at all. And we've seen multiple examples of them not doing very well. So I think the next one's this kind of takedown revolution that's happening at the moment. This idea of and it's not just the stand-up. You're seeing a lot more of the ideas coming from collegiate-style wrestling. So not the freestyle wrestling that you see in the Olympics, where they do a lot of the gut wrenches and stuff like that, but the collegiate wrestling, where you've got to remember 2/3 of collegiate wrestling take place on the ground. So it's only one of the periods that starts on the feet. The other 2 periods, one's on the bottom, one's on the top, and that switches round. So all this idea of being able to get up from the bottom, being able to break free, how to instead of just having guard as a bottom position, we have this idea of like bottom turtle as an aggressive attacking position that you can wrestle up out of and get back on top. So I think that stuff's starting to come in a lot more. You're seeing a lot more chlorides and stuff like that. That one's going to be a little harder to manipulate though, because there's only one country on the planet that trains folk style wrestling, and that's America.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. What advice do you have for the English guys over here, not just the English, but all the UK guys, to try and get anywhere close to that level of wrestling that the Americans have?
The benefit we've got is it's not the same as what they do. The rule set's different and the objectives at the end of it are different. So it's almost a different style of wrestling, and that's starting to emerge. And we're figuring out ways to take people down that would be classically much better at wrestling than you are. Does that make sense? Things like wrestle ups and stuff like that. You don't need to be a great wrestler because you're already starting from a level change position. So in terms of advice, I mean, you've got to be trained at a fairly progressive gym that trains those kind of ideas. So if you're somewhere that's still doing classical BJJ from 20 years ago, and which is still amazing, by the way, but you're not going to get the opportunity to learn those. I mean, we're literally just about to bring in like a takedown only class, but that's catered towards the rule set of jujitsu, because it is different. But yeah, it's tough. But it's happening. You're starting to see the level rate. I mean, it's the same thing you saw in MMA 15 years ago. It's like, well, we've got no chance. We can't compete with them on the wrestling, and we've proved that's not the case. You know, you ever do some stand up with Jimmy, and you realise real quickly that the stand up level's really, really high. Like, so I don't think you'll ever compete with them in folk style wrestling, but it's a different rule set. That's the same as the way that a lot of the Americans struggle to translate to freestyle wrestling. Just small rule changes affect people's efficacy and positions. Does that make sense? So
yeah, I suppose it's like the difference between competing under an ADCC rule set and competing in a sub only, like we were talking about just before we started recording. Obviously, they're not a different sport by any means, but it's a very different game.
I mean, they are. Once the points kick in, they're very much a different sport. You know, ADCC, once the points kick in, it is essentially a wrestling match. And that's why the wrestling's, because everybody knows that's the pinnacle of the sport. And I think it's a good rule set, because I think it takes us closer to MMA. And I think you'll see people transitioning over to MMA more if they were to train closer to with strikes in mind. I think that's a big mistake. So yeah, I mean, the ADCC, if that rule set didn't exist and it was sub only, then we wouldn't be seeing the takedown revolution happening at the moment. The rules always dictate the direction the sport will go. So it's up to the people that make the rules to come up with a rule set that encourages what you want the sport to aspire to. And that's the problem with ibjjf rule sets, and it doesn't encourage submissions. You know, you take a great like Leandro Lowe, God rest his soul, like one of the greatest of all times, but awful at finishing people. You know, but just the best sweeps, the best passes, so he'd sweep you and pass you, and there's nothing you can do about that. But you take that to something like MMA, it's not going to mean anything. So, you know, so the push towards takedown, towards winning the submission, that's gonna become a much bigger thing, I think, in the future.
Yeah, I think that's important, because obviously, like, jiu-jitsu has become a sport, but like first and foremost, as with any other martial arts, it was and is a life skill. You know, you're supposed to be able to use it to defend yourself in an actual fight. And the problem is, if you went like completely sport jiu-jitsu in a sub-only style and you try to pull guard to someone on the street, it's just not going to be an effective self-defense mechanism by any metric. Yeah, going back to your career, to carry on that chronology, when did you get your black belts? What was that like, that experience? Was it meaningful to you? Obviously, different people, some people say, you know, absolutely meant the world to them. Other people that are maybe more competition-minded, it was, you know, a nice thing to have, but wasn't like their ultimate goal. What was that experience like?
Yeah, I mean, I think I focused too much on it. I think I made it too much of a thing. But I mean, you know, and you're gonna, like, this sounds super cliched, but back then it was different because nobody had one. So I feel it did mean more than it probably does now. Yeah. And the standard of black belts now is probably much higher than when I got mine as well. In some instances, does that make sense?
I was going to ask you that. Do you think jiu-jitsu, the belt system, how has been like karate-fied in the sense that...
Definitely, yeah. I mean, but it was always going to happen.
Yeah.
So as you get a bigger data set, the bell curve switches in both directions. So at the top end of that data set, the standards got a lot higher. And like world champion black belts are definitely better than world champion black belts from 10 years prior. And 10 years, we just get better as we go, because we build on the shoulders of the people before us. But definitely, you know, definitely there's some black belts. I mean, essentially for me now, it's a measure of what the academy that you're in sets as its levels between it. That's all you can look at it now. I don't think, you know, I look at it as if it's the individual's journey. So like, you'll see real range in my blue belts, my purple belts, but you can't compare one purple to another purple belt. It's about their journey. Are you halfway to your journey of being a black belt?
It's relative to their goals.
100%. Well, not just relative to their goals, but relative to their overall ability, their capability.
Right. Okay.
So, if you see a shit purple belt in here, it's probably because I foresee him as being a shit black belt, and they've reached their limit. It's brutal, but it is what it is. But if you start going like, well, everybody must meet this standard. Braulio Estima is a black belt, and then if you're beneath him, like, well, I'm never going to be a black belt. I'm half decent at jiu-jitsu. I beat most people that come in through my doors, but I don't beat him. So, like, where do you set the bar? And so the bar has to be set for each individual. As more people go into it, even by my own standards, then you're going to get some black belts that are going to be of a much lower level. I mean, I've given out black belts. There's been a range. Well, I've got to be careful now. But there's been a range in the black belts that I've given out. Because there has to be. But yeah, I mean, I don't think it's the wow it was, 10, 15 years ago. But purely because nobody had one. Does that make sense?
So it was a very big deal when you got your black belt.
For me, yeah. For other people, but again, I'd built it up into my head into something that I shouldn't have done, And I think it was made worse by Braulio holding me back as well, and then giving other people their black belts that I was running rings round of, and I held myself back. I think years worrying too much about the belts, And because it affected the way I did in competition. I thought, if I'm not winning these competitions, Braulio's not ready for his next bout and things like that. And I try and really emphasise in this gym that it's got nothing to do with how you perform at competitions. And we seem to have a surge of people wanting to compete now, because I do everything I can to try and take the external pressures off them, because it's horrible enough competing. You get the adrenaline and all that. If you're not used to that, it's disgusting. So I do absolutely everything I can to try and remove those things for them. I almost tell them it's not about the jiu-jitsu, it's just about going to experience that kind of adrenaline dump. So I think, for me, yeah, it was massive, man. I was like looking at myself in the mirror all the time, and every time I catch my reflection, I was checking it out. So, but yeah, it kind of means less now that I'm a little bit older, but I must have over a dozen black belts that are already under me now. So yeah, I've kind of, I've seen a range of them.
Yeah, my friend Sam that trains with us makes a good point. He says if being a black belt or being any belt was like solely based on the skill you were able to display on the mat, you'd be having to take away black belts from people as they got older, because obviously their ability to perform well on the mat or in competition is going to diminish as they get older.
For sure, yeah.
So you'd never be, you'd get stripped of your black belt when you get to 50, 60 years old, because you can't, beat a blue belt on the mat anymore.
Yeah.
It's obviously not, demonstrative of the knowledge you have in here, and as well, like the experience you built up. There's something to be said for just the status of it, right? Time served.
Yeah. I mean, and we've got a little bit of that problem now, as well as in people only really want to learn off the current world champion. And I'm like, there's guys out there with decades of knowledge. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you get on the mat with someone like a Maurizio Gomez or something like that, it's magical, but he's not going to show you a berimbolo. So you have to be ready. And what the other problem with jiu-jitsu that suffers from, like, with what's the next big thing is, we don't focus on the basics enough. It's another cliched line, but you've still got people like Roger that won absolutely everything with really, really fundamental, I won't say basic, but fundamental moves that you would learn early, but he has this deeper understanding of it, and we've got to be careful that we don't lose that, I think, and that's again when you can move away from the street effectiveness of it. Like, a lot of these original techniques were designed for when somebody's punching you in the face. You start rolling underneath for berimbolos and stuff like that, you're going to kind of lose that a little bit.
So what are those fundamentals that you think need to be just absolutely spot on for the new person walking in through the door? What would your advice be to them? Like 3 to 5 things that they really need to absolutely get right.
Well, we have a fundamentals program, which I was unsure about, and it's the best thing we ever did, because it's by far the most popular class that we run. It's absolutely ram jammed. We run a Monday and a Wednesday, and it's packed. And I really enjoy teaching really basic techniques, but being able to go, talk to some people about some levels deeper with it, but making sure they've got them absolutely on the lockdown. And it's things, for me, a lot of the basic things you're going to have to learn aren't things that you would use when you become a blue belt. So, I think the problem that people do is they walk through the door And the first thing that you do as a white belt is go, right, I need to learn that so I can beat the blue belt. And what they forget is there's someone on the other side of them that is the kid that's never seen any jiu-jitsu. And if you get into a street fight with him, what's he going to do? He's not going to actually act the way that you do once you, literally 6 weeks of BJJ, you stop straightening your arms out. 6 weeks of BJJ, you stop squeezing and hugging heads. I worked the door for years. Do you know what you see a lot of? A lot of fucking squeezing heads and headlocks and stuff like that. But then what happens is you get to like purple belt, like really, really great jiu-jitsu, and then some big juiced up monkey comes off the street that's had a few scraps and pretty tough, and he's headlocking them inside their guard, and they're really stuck. They don't know what to do. So it's making sure that, so for me, a lot of the basics are like, we make a big thing like, you know, can you escape headlocks from the bottom of the mount? Can you escape headlocks from the side? Can you get out from the mount? You know, have you got? And then the other thing about basics is we call it like dead man jiu-jitsu. So moves that don't require us to have like a conversation with the movement. See what I'm saying? So I move here, then for the move, you're gonna move in one of 3 or 4 directions, and I react to that move. Those become more intermediate techniques where I'm reacting to your movement. So things like Americanas, where you can literally lie there and have them done to you and things like that, and make sure you understand how all those work. But we have, I think there's 32 lessons on our fundamentals program that we run through. And what it's been good for is actually holding me back. So before I had that, I'd start showing a move, and then I'd show the more advanced variation and I'd move on. So it's been good for kind of holding us back. And once you've got fairly good jiu-jitsu, you forget what it's like for people that have never ever seen jiu-jitsu. You know, you just think like, well, everybody knows this stuff surely, and it's amazing how they don't.
Yeah, that's it. It can be more difficult sometimes, can't it, to like roll against somebody like that's new but's got like all the piss and vinegar in them.
Yeah.
You know, really strong, explosive. They're not reacting how you're anticipating they're going to or even supposed to react.
100%. Yeah, they don't follow the rule book, which is you know, it's much easier for me to spar a blue belt than it is a really, really tough white belt. Like that can be a nightmare. Just because they'll do stuff like squeeze your head, and they'll just literally hold on for 5 minutes, squeezing the life out of your head if you don't know how to get out of it. So, yeah, for sure.
You mentioned a few moments ago about competition, the experience of it, the mindset of it. What was your experience like competing? Were you somebody that always kind of naturally felt at home competing? Was it a tough process for you to get used to mentally? How did that change along the way? Talk me through that.
I fucking hated it. I hated it. I was never a good competitor. So I won loads performing subpar, which really frustrates me. You know, they're just cliched lines, but I don't think you understand them until you've been through it. But I mean, it is 90% mental when you've got really good technique. Not before then. Before then, you're just delusional. You're kidding yourself that you're better than you are. Does that make sense? But if you're performing in the gym consistently, like walking through people, then and you're not doing that, and that doesn't translate to when you're competing. Like I was winning, but I wasn't winning the way that I was winning in the gym. I wasn't. Do you know what I mean? I'd get 2 points up, and then I'd cling on to leads, and again not trying to win by submission. So and I think that made it worse as well, trying to cling on to victories and things like that. So yeah, I wasn't a great competitor. You know, I feel like I'm better now. So, you know, I've been competing a little bit over the last sort of 3 or 4 years, just doing the odd competition. We've actually got one coming this weekend that I'm out of, the team one that we're defending for the 3rd time in a row. But I ruptured my bicep a month ago, so I'm out of the team. We've had to pull someone else in to step in for me.
Been something?
Tom Breeze.
Okay.
That's a good replacement. Wow, yeah. So there's a chance that Breeze just walks through them all, and yeah, exactly. Yeah, no pun intended. So yeah. I mean, I wasn't a great competitor, and I think going back to what we were saying about the belts, like how much the belt meant, I think that was one of the factors for me as well, and kind of being Braulio's number 1 as well. So I was kind of like, is better blue belts. You know, it just felt like a lot of pressure. You know, looking back now, it shouldn't have been. Like, who cares? You know, but I think I wanted to kind of emulate what Braulio was doing, and you know, he was going there and winning all these world titles. I'm like, I want that. And I think I focused too much on wanting to win than the task in hand, and I think that made it worse as well. But yeah, not a great competitor. Yeah, struggled with the adrenaline. Can handle it a little bit better now. But yeah, there's lots of matches I've lost, you know, where I beat myself before I even got on the mat.
What pieces of advice, if there are any, obviously it's very individualized because everyone has their own process, but do you have any like specific tips for people that struggle with competing as to how they can get a better mindset, a better approach to it, how they can deal with that adrenaline dump? Because that's obviously a massive thing for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, I've literally just been doing this the last year, and we've had ridiculous results with it. And I think it's especially when they're beginning. So set people up for what's actually going to happen. I think you see it with amateurs when they do MMA. We had an MMA team before, and all I was doing was having conversation with people about their weight every week. Oh yeah, I'm nearly on weight, and I'm like, how about you fucking stop worrying about your weight and start thinking about the fact you're going to go and have a fight? Like it's not a Weight Watchers competition. Yeah. It's a fight, but when my weight, and it's like, forget about. So what I did was I've kind of flipped it and said, well, don't even think about the jiu-jitsu. Like go in there, literally for your first 5-6 competitions, it's got nothing to do with the jiu-jitsu, and just got everything with you experiencing the adrenaline, what to expect, how horrible it is sitting in the bullpen. So just talking people through the reality of what competing is going to be like really helps, and then you start to visualize like the reality of it. Just expect horrible adrenaline dumps before you even turn up there. The toilets are going to fucking stink because everybody's suffering the same thing. And I think everybody just focuses on like the getting on the mat bit. They don't know what that feeling like when they wake up and they're like, shit, I'm competing today. Like that's a horrible feeling, and the adrenaline starts, and then you're like, what? Everybody feels that. So it's just part of the course, and like, yeah, okay, here we go. Like an old familiar friend, And then the other thing is to just do it regularly. That's like, to get you just used to the idea of competing. Like the people that don't really seem to suffer are the ones that are literally doing it every weekend,
It's exposure therapy, isn't it?
100%.
The more you do, the more mundane it becomes.
Yeah. I mean, and that's why like you've got like the Americans, like the wrestlers that literally compete on a huge stage every weekend. They have to make weight every weekend. Like that's, why they do so well in MMA. It's all about the grind and the way they train. It's like, yeah, and the fact that they compete they're so used to the pressure of competing. You see like the Hawkeye Arena or like the Oklahoma State Wrestling Arena. It's like a football match. There's thousands of people there, and they use that every weekend for 4 years straight. Every weekend, having to make weight. Every weekend, it's going to be easy for those people. So that's the first one. So I think initially, prep your mindset up for the what's going to happen on the day, like the feeling of it. Expect it, and just don't expect anything from yourself, because I think that's why I didn't compete as well very well. Like if it was a local competition, you're gonna, and everybody in your ear is worse as well. You're gonna win this. No, you're not necessarily. Like anything can happen, and you're less likely to the more you think that you're gonna win it. The more you can keep sort of focused on like the task in hand, and like I remember like so many matches being like mid-match, and I'm like, shit, I'm losing. Like those thoughts shouldn't even be going through your head. You should be thinking like, where's his limbs? What's my next play going to be? Where's his body orientated right now? Like you should be so immersed in the act itself, you're not thinking about the crowd or what's happening. So there can be lots of variables in it, but yeah, for me, prep yourself up for what's going to happen on the day. Literally all of it. You get caught into that bullpen, that's going to be at its worst. So, and I'm from doing that, I've asked people how they got in the comment. They were like, "Oh, it wasn't as bad as I was expecting." And when it's not as bad as you're expecting, that's when you'll perform quite well. You can go there and kind of be like, "Oh, I'm actually all right." I think when you're not expecting it, that's when it hits you hard.
Yeah. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I agree. I think like regularity is so important. The more you compete, the better you're going to get in terms of your actual technique, physically on the mat, but the mindset as well. But is there a thing what's too much competing? Because obviously other sports you have defined on seasons, off seasons. Mm-hmm. With MMA, you fight 3 times a year. That's an active year. So you have your camp, then you have your off season after the fight in between it. How do you think people should be structuring like their competition cycles? Because it's on the individual athlete to decide that, right? You're not in a league. It's not like other sports. How should BJJ athletes decide that?
So what we're seeing now, you kind of see there's like a no-gi season and a gi season in the year. So that kind of cycle happens. But just for individual athletes, I think it depends on what point they are in their career. I think the problem with people that compete too much is like, well, when you're backing away and when you're training, when you're experimenting, because if you're always competing, you're never learning, because it's too dangerous to start spending 2 months working on a new area if you've got to keep everything sharp to compete all the time. I don't think it really matters too much in your kind of formative years. I think the more you compete, the better. So if you compete every weekend, as provided you can allow yourself to learn when you come back and not be like, I'm competing next weekend, I've got to make sure I'm doing this. You know, the number of people that book one-to-ones and they're like, right, I need a competition game plan. And I'm like, you're fucking, what do you mean a competition? It's called jujitsu. You know, that's what you're doing every time you come in here and train, is working on your competition game plan. And it's like they want this secret formula that's going to be the secret to success. And it's just not going to happen. You know, get used to competing. Don't be afraid, you know, to try lots of new things, you know, and have little mini projects that you write down, that your cast iron projects that you've got to go, right, I need to improve on, whatever it may be. You know, you just do that over the next 3 months, but you could be competing throughout that time, you know, and as you get nearer to that goal, you can start to try and put that in when you're competing. But I've seen people that literally learn a move and go on. I've had guys in MMA where I've taught them moves in the warm-up area and they've literally gone and done it. So you just horses for courses, like, you know, different people will do different things.
So a real emphasis on regularity of competition when you're like a white belt.
For sure, yeah, when you're early, yeah.
And then potentially start thinking more selectively about the process then when you get to like a purple, brown, black belt level.
Yeah, I think so. And the other thing you got to remember, we were talking about this, why jiu-jitsu competitions aren't cheap. Yeah. So you're shelling out £80 a week. You can run the numbers on that. You know, especially if you're going to. Sometimes you can compete a Saturday and Sunday, and there'll be different competitions on at the weekend. So it can get super expensive as well. I think that for me is the biggest barrier for a lot of people to compete and get regularity of training. It's just the cost, you know.
Yeah, well, speaking from personal experience, it's definitely a factor for me. You know, I can't afford, especially something like a grappling industry. You go into a grappling industry, it's like, you know, if you pay for it 2 weeks before, you're looking at about £100.
Yeah.
And then obviously that's you travel down there, travel back, food and everything.
Yeah.
So it's by no means a cheap affair.
Yeah, no, and you get knocked out first round.
Yeah.
Like you go in and have 30 seconds of grappling, it's like, it'd be nice if you ran a round robin or something like that, wouldn't it? So, but yeah, unfortunately, jiu-jitsu competitions aren't made for you, they're made for the promoters. And I think that's the problem we've got with jiu-jitsu now is, you know, it's not like a nationally governed sport like judo is. So judo comps are set up for the competitors. They're not set up for people to make money from. So that you know, sometimes they'll run at a loss and the national governing body helps support it. You know, it's like £15 to do a judo comp. You know, so if people want regularity of competitions, maybe go and do a little bit of judo or something like that. You know, but the wrestling comps are the same as well. Like that, you know, and I'd argue a lot of them are better run. Like the format when I've completed in freestyle, like they just have a number running from like 1 to, you know, an indefinite number, like let's say 200. You go and have your match, and you just bugger off. And you come back again, you say, oh, I'm 36. So you're just looking on the mat and the numbers flicking down. So you know when you get to like 28, oh shit, I better start warming up again, you know. And yes, you are competing throughout the day, but there's a benefit to that as well. Like you can make sure when you step back on the mat, you're proper fresh, you know. And it's a day of competing, and you're constantly like, you know, it's nice doing your jiu-jitsu. I've done my mat, then I'm done, and it's all over in half hour. But you know, I think I preferred the wrestling format once I got used to it. But just so much cheaper, yeah.
Do you foresee jiu-jitsu getting to that point where it becomes a nationally governed sport?
No, not a chance.
What don't you think?
There's too much money involved in it. Yeah, there's too many people getting rich off it at the moment. I think you know.
What, as in there's too much money in jiu-jitsu?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. I think you know, people aren't going to want to start reducing the cost of competition. They've just kept rising. You know, the idea of paying £80 for a competition, like just a local competition. You know, if you'd have told me that 10 years ago, I'd been like, that's unfathomable. Who's going to pay that? But they do, you know, and like you kind of almost stuck now as a young grappler. If you want to start succeeding in the sport, you kind of have to pay for it, and it's I think it's a bit exploitative personally. So that's why I don't do a lot of comps now. I'll do like we've got the Zion this weekend and things like that. So if I'm invited on something, I'll go and do it, but I'm not paying £80 to go and do a competition now.
Yeah, I suppose like the benefit or the other side of it is, with jiu-jitsu becoming so much more popular, there's so much more opportunity for sponsorship now. There's opportunity for competitors to make money, but obviously that's hard, right? When you're starting out.
Yeah, exactly that at the top end. I mean, a lot of the companies, you know, there's a lot of really good brand companies now that are sponsoring young athletes, but nowhere near enough to make it worthwhile, you know. and they're wanting to sponsor the athletes that they can potentially foresee, going all the way and continuing to support them later on. So that there is the potential. There is definitely potential to make money out of it now, which wasn't there sort of 10 years ago. Through just competing, not like running a club and having seminars and things like that. So it is positive, and I love the way that jiu-jitsu's heading that way a little bit, and seeing the stuff on UFC Fight Pass and Polaris and Grapple Fest and all those kind of big competitions is a real positive. And a lot of those big comps, they do like run like the blue belts, and they'll have purple belts and brown belts on there, which is a good thing as well. But yeah, I can't see it getting to the point where you're going to be able to. I can't see a jiu-jitsu comp coming up where you're going to pay 20 quid to do it.
Okay, well that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
What about the coaching side of things?
Mm-hmm.
When did you start coaching?
So back in the day, there weren't the black belts like there were now. I started coaching when I was a blue belt, like Braulio.
Okay.
Braulio put me into a club in Telford. And I was covering a lot of the classes for Braulio as well, because Braulio was such an active competitor. He'd like disappear for weeks, sometimes months on end. So I was covering. So yeah, I was coaching pretty much as soon as I got my blue belt, I was coaching, and I got my blue belt pretty quick. So I think I was training 3 months when I got my blue belt. But I'd been grappling beforehand, so with the JKD and stuff like that. So I had a little grappling experience. So I got my blue belt pretty quick, got my purple belt pretty slow. But yeah, coaching pretty much from blue belt on.
And what was that experience like? Did you find yourself to be a natural coach, or was it something you had? Obviously, you've continued to progress over time.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, did it come naturally to you?
Yeah, I think so. I worked as a school teacher for years as well, and then taught PE as well in school. So I was always used to kind of coaching. And it was easy as well, because they're just like, now I think it'd be tough as a blue belt coaching, because people are going to be like, there's so many other higher grades. People are going to be like, well, why have I only got a blue belt? But back then, I remember when I first started doing it, there were blue belts taking seminars in jiu-jitsu, So people were having blue belts over to teach a seminar, like only like at smallish clubs, but that was like, I didn't see a black belt when I first started training for the first 6 months. I think it was when Maurizio came over on a visit. So it wasn't too bad coaching as a blue belt then, because you were a blue belt. There might be another couple of blue belts in there, and then there'd be like 20 white belts on the mat. So yeah, it wasn't too bad. And I really enjoyed coaching. I definitely would consider myself as more of a coach than a competitor. But yeah, relatively easy.
Do you find that coaching helps you as, when I say a competitor, not necessarily the actual competing elements of it like we've just talked about, but do you find it helps your own jiu-jitsu, or are the two kind of devoid of one another, do you think?
No, it definitely helps your jiu-jitsu. Yeah, no, I'd recommend everybody coaches. I think, case in point, so one of my black belts, Brad Boyden, the best development I've seen in him is since he's had his own club.
Oh, okay.
Because he has to sit down and look at some videos and actually learn some techniques, like what you're going to show. You better have the details down, and it's kind of, oh shit, I didn't know as much as I thought I knew. And if you said to somebody, right, you're going to have no YouTube, no videos, and you're going to teach for the next 6 months, and I'm going to sit and watch you, you'd see people really thinking about it. And then the other thing is, you don't realize how much stuff comes naturally, and then you're seeing somebody screwing it up, and then you start to, so you get this deeper understanding of the technique when you start analysing it. And that's what's been great about teaching the fundamentals as well. You start to really dig into the thing beneath the surface layer of the obvious movement you're seeing, but there's stuff existing beneath the water that you kind of get into when you're coaching, that you might have naturally been doing without realising on a conscious level that you were doing it. So yeah, I'd recommend everybody gives coaching a go.
At what point did you because I'm guessing obviously your priority back then was still competing. At what point did you make the transition to being like a coach first and foremost, competitor second?
Yeah, like jiu-jitsu was just like a hobby. Like the idea of being able to make money out of jiu-jitsu when I first started doing jiu-jitsu didn't exist, and I couldn't have ever called myself calling yourself I'm a competitor. Like I don't think, like when you're a blue belt, a competitor of what? Like you can't, you're a blue belt, so you're doing it as a hobby. So
was it always still in your mind a hobby, even when you were winning, when you're going to compete European Championships?
Yeah. Because like the only way you could even make, like Braulio was making money out of running a club, so that was the idea in my head. Like when I get to a certain level, I'll open up my own club and hopefully be able to make a living out of it, but probably not. probably have to have a job as well. So yeah, I mean, I think back when I was doing jiu-jitsu, there wasn't this idea of competitor coach. Everybody coached, everybody, even if you're a world champion, like the only way you're making money is by doing seminars and running your club. And the bigger your name, the more people will come to your club. So that'll have a knock-on effect. But the idea that you could ever make money being a competitor is something really new. Literally in the last 5 years, 5 years, you can actually make a sustainable living not teaching seminars. I mean, the DVD market thing, that's exploded. And I think a lot of people, the top flight guys can make a lot of money out doing that type of thing.
What do you think are the main qualities someone that's going to be a good coach in jiu-jitsu needs?
So you've got a few things. So it depends whether you're talking about being an instructor or being a coach, because I kind of view them as two different things.
Give us both.
So an instructor, you've got to have a deep subject knowledge, and especially with the breadth of jiu-jitsu now. So unless you're a world champion, you could keep your breadth of knowledge fairly small and get away with just teaching that because you've got such deep understanding of it. And what you're going to find is you've got high-level competitors coming to want to know that. If you're going to run a commercial club, if you want to have a range of players, so if you want a commercial club but you're only aiming ever at club level players, then your subject knowledge, it's still going to be good. But like, if I look at all the black belts from my generation, let's say, I could probably count on one hand. I could list a load of techniques, So if I think of all the people that got me my black belt now, I'd be saying like, right, show me 6 variations on a berimbolo and why you would use them. I can almost guarantee they wouldn't be able to do it. And I could say, right, show me like what my brake mechanics when I'm in outside ashi versus the saddle, how do they differ? And they probably wouldn't have an answer for me. So the breadth of subject knowledge, I think, is important depending on your target audience. So if you're going to have an academy where you're teaching from beginner, but you've also got people going to ADCC trials that are going to compete, that's important. But as an instructor, like a coach is kind of almost a little bit different. So a coach has got other responsibilities outside of that, and for jiu-jitsu, especially with there no money in it, it's difficult. Like MMA is slightly different where you might be getting paid as a coach, but you've got to deal with other things to that as well. So you've got to make sure you're supportive there. You're going to give them advice on different things. You're going to help them out, potentially with how they're going to get to competitions, what they do on the day of the competitions. You're going to start helping them out with advice about strength and conditioning, diet advice, all of that thing. So the coaching thing takes kind of a much, and if you've got someone that's going to listen to you, then you can start to mold the player into what you see, and you can help them on their journey. An instructor is more, you're just there to teach the class. You make sure everybody's learning the stuff on there. You're going to impart knowledge. So there's kind of two different things there.
What about pieces of advice, for, well, actually, I had this written down separately. I have a feeling you might say that they should really be focusing on the same things, but I have written down 3 tips for the hobbyist walking through the doors, and then 3 tips for somebody that wants to be a serious competitor, wants to try and reach the highest heights of the sport.
It's such a difficult question because it's so different for every individual. I would say for the beginner walking through the door, it conflicts because I bounce back and forth with both these. I'd say initially try to spend less time on YouTube learning every technique and try and focus on what you're being taught in the class. Kind of because you want to consume as much knowledge as you can when you're ready to consume that knowledge. A lot of the time it can just be information overload and you've not got the details right, you've not been shown the move, and especially if you're figuring out something that your coach doesn't know, then you've got to be careful as well that you're not learning it incorrectly as well. So focus on the basics as a beginner. Make sure you've got those down on pat. Make sure you can definitely do them. Try to make sure you're training to learn, not to win every single one of your roles. Try to, what other one would I say for a beginner? Make sure you're looking after your training partner as much as you're looking after yourself, because obviously if you've not got a decent training partner, you're not going to learn, because what you want is someone that can go along the journey with you as well as a beginner. That's super helpful. Someone that you can back and forth with, so you're training with if you're just training with a different person every single session, it's going to be hard because they don't know how you move. They don't know what you did before. You can't have these conversations. So I think, those are kind of my three that I'd say for a beginner. The advanced player, that's so difficult to say because it depends. Because my tips would always be based on what their weaknesses are, and your individual weakness might be different to somebody else's individual weakness, if that makes sense. So it's a bit of a non-answer, but it depends. Okay. Like if you're a decent competitor, but you're gassing out a lot, then my advice to you is going to be different than if you're a competitor and you're actually just being too passive and you're not putting enough aggressive energy into the techniques. You're being too kind of laissez-faire about the way you're playing jiu-jitsu, and you need to actually get up and put points on the board. So it really would depend on the athlete, I think, once you get past those kind of beginner levels.
Right, okay. Do you think like an imperative is for people to like focus on the wrestling with the way the game's going? Or do you think that again is dependent on
yeah, but who you're talking to? If you're talking to someone that's come from a judo background or something like that, or a wrestler that's come in that's already got takedowns, maybe he needs to focus more on a certain, like literally assess the game, figure out. I mean, that would be the tip. Just be really brutally honest about where your weaknesses lie, and do not fear taking a step back in order to improve those, because that's what people do. They get good at something and they just maintain that, and the higher up the ranks they go, you see more and more of that, Braulio was like, I mean, people talk about the fact that Gordon's constantly changing. Like Braulio, I would argue was better than Gordon at that. I think if you watch Braulio's, and I can't think of any other black belts that used to do it, like his games would change every world championship, completely different, Like, I mean, just think about when he won ADCC and he was doing the inverted triangle. He caught Andre Galvão in that inverted triangle and tapped him out. And he caught Jandy Ribeiro in that inverted triangle and tapped him out. And you go and try and find an inverted triangle before that. It didn't happen. It was just something he was working on. And the same as that Estima lock. He broke Lovato's foot with that. Like 3 things that he'd been working on as little projects. And then I've seen him going to world championships. He's never with a berimbolo. And then he's trying to do berimbolos. He's worked some, you know what I mean? It's like, if you can do that as an advanced player and go, right, I'm going to have a new project, I'm going to really make this a thing, and then have the confidence to go into competition and go, right, this competition is not about winning, it's about me trying to implement this new thing that I've been working on. I think that's really important. I don't think we see enough of that, so that'd be something else I'd kind of try and push for a little bit as well.
What's your stance on people rolling with people that say like vastly lighter than them or vastly heavier than them? Obviously, it's a weight class sport, isn't it? But we do have absolute divisions. Do you think people, and again, is it dependent on the person, whether where they compete, how heavy they are? But do you think people should be looking to roll with all shapes and sizes, or do you think you should be really trying to focus on rolling with people that are your weight? And then I suppose skill level's a different thing as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem. Like, you look on a mat and you're like, well, what are your choices? Like, if you're a 65 kilogram bloke, like, all right, so you only want to roll with, fine. Like, you go and roll with all the other 65 kilogram guys on the mat. Like, there might be one other, and a couple of girls that might be around that weight. Do you see what I'm saying? It becomes like optimum versus achievable. Like, what are you actually going to do? So the reality is, I mean, at the pinnacle of my pyramid, it is always like, we do this as a martial art and you should be thinking about self-defense. So, but at the same time, if you're a competitor and every guy in your gym's massive and you're likely to get injured, and the other problem, and you see this with a lot of the girls, is you end up developing a certain way of playing jiu-jitsu when you're 4 or 5 weight divisions out of their size. So it does have problems. So I think everybody should roll with everybody, but I also think that you should be doing the bulk of your training, if possible, with people of your own weight. I think you should do a lot more training with people that aren't as good as you, because I think you should be doing the bulk of your training as developmental training. So if you're developing skills, then you're not going to want to try it on me. It's like, so when people are just training to win all the time, they might not get put underneath side control. If they're one of the better guys in the gym, the only time they get put under side control is when I'm rolling with them. That's not a good time to be working your side control escapes that you never ever drill. Now you've waited till the best guy in the gym is lay on top of you, squeezing you. So
So you think that the bulk of your training time should be devoted to training with people or rolling with people
of a lesser skill level? Yeah, for sure, without a shadow of a doubt, you know. And it's kind of become like Danaher said it, and so anytime he says anything, then it becomes everybody starts preaching it. But I was having this argument for years, just because, and I think this is why I was always nervous in competitions. Like, Braulio would assault me. It was horrendous, and it was like, how the fuck am I supposed to go in here with a modicum of confidence when you've just gone and done that to me? Like, I know that I'm not that good. You can tell me I'm good, you know. But the guys I was losing to sometimes, I was better than. But it's a confidence killer. You know, you saw the same thing like Jimmy will tell you about what Neil Adams was like. You know, like, he retired, but the problem was Neil was still the fucking man. So the guys he was coaching, he was like just walking through still. How do you send someone into an international competition to face the best guy in the world when a retired athlete has just absolutely trounced them? So, you know, you don't get anything other than, you know, a bit of grit. I mean, like Shark Tank, like the worst possible training method ever invented. And I was having it, and back when I was coming through, like, that was really popular. Well, you got to get used to training fatigue. No, you don't. Like, what other sport? Like, you don't see snooker players training fatigued. It's like it's going to all go to shit. So,
do you think the argument is, though, that you need a bit more grit for like a combat sport like jiu-jitsu?
No, it's bullshit. No, it's bullshit. It's like get used to experiencing high levels of fatigue on the assault bike where it's miserable and stuff like that. Like, we can achieve that anaerobic deficit. We can do things like that in a safe environment. You know, the last thing that you want to do is scrape yourself off the mat, and then have like a Jimmy Warhead on top of you punching your head, going, "Yeah, it's going to be good for you to learn how to like be tough underneath there." It's like, toughness doesn't win fights; skill wins fights.
So keep the mental grit development in the gym.
Yeah, you need a little bit of it, but like I'm not saying you don't ever need to go hard. You do. But every single round, you're never developing, and development's the most important thing. How am I developing? Like, you know, and you'll see people that, I don't feel like I'm doing much, and it's like, well, you've got to change something up then, because if you're not developing, you're doing something wrong. Because there's so much to learn and so many things you can do. But I'm so lucky, like, I'm developing things all the time really quickly because I've got progressive resistance all the way down. Does that make sense? It's like the bar, like on a new lift, I can start light and build it up until I've got different guys and then I can have a problem with this guy down here that I could beat, but not with the technique I'm trying. So I can get better at the little area where it's the sticking point. I can go and drill back down here. The problem is when you're a white belt, like that's when you're gonna have to develop some grit because you've got no choice. You're gonna be getting your ass handed to you a lot. So, you know, grit development will come. And again, it's what you're going to do. It's all well and good me going, the bulk of your training should be done with people that you're better than. What the fuck does a white belt do? So it's a lot of the time, it's, you know, you're in a gym, like, how many people have you got in there? You're going to train with people of all weights, all sizes. You're going to do the best you can, you know. But yeah, that's what I think in terms of training. I think a lot of the time you're going to get what you get. But yeah, optimum would of course be to train with people that similar sort of weight to you and of a slightly lesser skill set would be good. But again, of course, you need to be going and getting the rounds where you know, the great thing about being a blue belt is there is lots of progressive targets to keep going after, you know, that you can measure. And then you've got to look what your metric of actually doing well. And this is what I'm always saying to people, like, not getting submitted is the poorest metric of improvement. You know, you got tapped 10 times last week, but got tapped 4 the following week. I've got better. And it's like, no, you could have got a lot worse. You might just be literally balling up and doing nothing. Like, you know, how many submission attempts did you have? Doesn't matter whether they landed or not. Like, how many attempts at moves did you do? You want to think of it like a time motion analysis, that type of thing. And you're going to get those numbers up with people that aren't as skillful as you. You know, how many submissions did you let off against somebody so much better than you? None. You know, so if you spend literally your whole time literally just trying to not get submitted, that's all you're going to get.
So you've got somebody that can only train a certain amount of hours per week, that don't have the benefit of being able to train every day.
Mm-hmm.
In that limited scenario, what would you advise them to focus on the most? Is there specific things you would tell them to focus on in order to kind of try and even the field, get an advantage, specialise in certain things? Do you think like the leg locks are the way to go with that?
I think now we're in danger of trying to get too good too quick is the problem. And the leg locks definitely isn't the way to go now because everybody's doing that. Like I can't remember his name, but we had a lad that was he's a brown belt, really good, but just all leg locks. But he obviously walks through people with it and has done for a while. But my leg locks are pretty good. And then when it was the upper body game, like upper body knowledge of submissions was atrocious. Like I think become an arm lock specialist now because everybody's forgotten about it. Like, and you're seeing Yamika Galvals and people like that. They're bringing that back. You know, it's the leg lock bubble burst and then it came back. I think what you really want to do is get very, very good at escapes. I think that's where your true confidence will come because once you don't need to, and I look back at we go back to the competition thing. Like I reckon I was so nervous because I'd got a path to victory, but if I got derailed from that, I could be in trouble. Whereas if you've got great escapes, and you look at all the greats, you know, from the Gordon to your Rogers to you name it, they've all got phenomenal escapes. They've all been in sticky positions and always got out, and they've got the confidence they can get out. So, you know, for me, absolutely now your positional and submission escapes. If you can't be submitted and you can't be pinned in any position, then everything's going to start coming easy because you're not going to be afraid to throw punches. It's like every time I throw a punch, if I get hit, I'm just not going to throw very much. I'm just going to try and bide my time until that perfect shot comes. That's not how it works. You've got to throw them in bunches because they're going to fail way more than they work. How do you get your submission percentage up? Be great at defense because every time you throw a submission, you're in danger. You're essentially exposed. You can pass my guard, but as long as I go, that's all right. I'll just get my guard back. That'll get you super confident, you know. And that was the biggest change in my game. And I look back and I think like, okay, so I've been training, let's say 25 years or something like that. I've probably spent 19, probably more than that, probably 23 on top of side control, winning inside guard bottom, guard top. So I think how many of those years have I spent underneath side control? And then I go, then I have to deduct how many of those years were Braulio on top of me in side control, where I couldn't do anything. Does that make? And then you go, actually, I was just winning too much. And then the only time I was losing was against guys that were better than me. Not a good time to start trying to work on developing an area of your game that you're not very good at. So
yeah, that's a good point. When you're training with people that are not as experienced as you shouldn't just be focusing on working your offense on them. You should be focusing on working your defense as well.
You don't get. Yeah, I mean that's. I always tell people like, especially the white belts now and the blue belts. And again, I suppose this is you put me on the spot asking about the tips. They're coming to me now that I've had a chance to think. But I'd say one of the things that I say to a lot of people is think about early on in your career, not 10 years down the line, but are you getting a third of your time on underneath, on bottom? You know, you want a third on top, and then it's probably slightly different because you probably want 60% inside, both passing and working from your guard. Okay, but then the other 40%, you kind of want to split that between bottom and top. You want to, you know, and I've got to the point now where I like side control for attacking. So I have a problem with people running all the time. It's like they don't really engage, especially nogi where they can be in and out all the time. So I start setting up and then they just run away from me. In fact, in my last one in Zion, I let the kid pass. It's really obvious that I've let him pass. I mean, he can say what he wants, but it's like I was chasing. It's like nothing's happened. It's like come to side, and I had a submission in like literally 10 seconds after he passed my guard because I've got connection and tightness. Like I've got the connection that I want. So if you're super confident from working, and again, that could be an area that's really untapped in terms of offensive actions is bottom side. It's, you know, if you can become a master of that, you can be a very dangerous player.
Well, that's what we're seeing now a bit, isn't it, with the boogie chokes? People kind of baiting guard passes into those boogie chokes.
Yeah, we've got a few guys in the gym that are like phenomenal at them. I mean, the problem with the buggy and the guys that are, I mean, we've got one lad, Ben, he's a blue belt that's, I think he must have 17 buggies in competition now, something like that. He's won so many competitions with it. But he's never caught me in the gym with it because I can defend it. So I respect that he's got it. I know he can do it, but I can defend it. The problem with stuff like the buggy is it violates certain positional things that you should always do. So you're basically throwing your legs up and over, which if it works is great. My issue is what happens when it fails. And then you're like, shit, now I've got to try and get my frames back into position. That can, you know, again, the bubbles burst a little bit on the buggy choke already. You know, there's really good variations inside the guard that I quite like, from like half guard and stuff like that, where you can throw like a one-handed buggy up and stuff like that. I like that because when it fails, you're not shit or bust type scenario. you know. But yeah, absolutely. But I mean, you look at someone like a Gordon and people like that, like, you know, there's some footage called the Modolfo Clinic. You can buy the DVDs, and he's letting like JT Torres put him in Kimuras and so. Like JT was arguably, when this was shot, was top 5 nogi competitor on the planet Earth, and he's just like giving him Kimuras and getting out. And I'm amazed that JT agreed to have the footage put out there, because he makes him look like a blue belt, and you're like, that's not Gordon, that's Danaher. And this is where we don't, there aren't many Danaher type figures where high level guys will listen to everything the coach says. That's a bit of a problem with jiu-jitsu, in the fact that once you almost stop listening to your coach. Now I know better because I'm the world champion type thing, but he forces all of those guys to spend time underneath, and that was one of the big things that separates them. I mean, you look at Gary Tonin, like every time he's in danger, everybody knows he's not really in danger. Yeah. Most of the time he's going to spin that around, and you watch his fight against Gilbert Burns, and he was just letting him pass all the time. Let him pass, start to 4-point, start rolling back in on the legs again. And it was just a masterclass in how relaxed going into a competition, going like, well, there's no way you're going to beat me. So now I can just relax and let it go. So yeah.
ADCC coming up quite soon.
Yeah.
Do you have any predictions as such, whether it's wins and losses, themes you're going to see?
Yeah, I think what I love now, and I've been really trying to push people, like we've seen the gi really drop off, especially in my academy, and I'm really trying to encourage people to do it. And it frustrates me now. And there was this narrative, and I was spouting the narrative as well, like 2050, you can't train both, you've got to specialise in one or the other. And I think this year it's going to be back to what it was always before. I think there was a little window of 5 years where the nogi's got to specialise. It's too complicated, you've got to specialise. Are you sure? Because I think Mika's going to win his division, and he's a prolific gi player. I think Diego Pato is going to win the 66, prolific gi player, but probably got the best leg locks in the world at the moment. I think Maragall is going to win, prolific gi player, probably the best gi player on planet Earth at the moment as well. I think Fabricio Andre is going to have a really good showing, another really prolific gi player. So I think it's going to be the return of the Brazilians. I think you're going to see a lot of Brazilians doing really well. I think Diego Pato is going to win. I think Fabricio Andre is going to put a good showing. I think Mika Galvão is going to win that 77 division. Who we got in at 88?
Taylor Pearman won the
trials.
Yeah.
God bless his soul. I don't think he's going to win it though.
No, we've got I think J Rod's been invited back.
Yeah, I don't see him
winning. He didn't win. Who did he lose to in the finals? I forgot who he.
So Tackett's. Tackett was one of my hot picks all along. So yeah, Tackett's. Yeah, both those boys look fucking really good, and they've got their own thing going on. So I mean, the problem you've got with the Danaher thing, I'm a fucking Danaher nut hugger. So you'll see my jiu-jitsu. I've done whatever it is. It's like, well, they're the best. Let's copy what they're doing. The Tackett boys are really good because they're not doing what everybody else is doing. They're doing their own thing and just really, really good at it. You know, the way they pass, just this relentless passing they do. So I think he's another one that you got to watch out for. I think Giancarlo's got a chance of repeating as well on the 88 front. And then I think, I'm not sure, is Maragali over 99?
No, he was under 99, I believe. Last
time he was. I'm on about this time though.
Yeah, I'm not sure this time.
If like money's got to be on Maragali, hasn't it? And then I don't think Gordon's doing the weight this time.
No, yeah, he said he's not doing it.
So
yeah.
Okay,
Nicky Rod.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah,
probably. Yeah.
So based off of what you said,
but that being said, and another gi player actually. That being said, I'll stop you there. What's his name? Jimenez. I think people have written Jimenez off, and I think, like, did you see Nicky Rod's and Jimenez fight last time?
No, I didn't watch it.
Jimenez was fucking putting it on him, man. Like in the wrestling as well. And Jimenez is like ground games much better. And you saw Victor Hugo beat him the other day, didn't he? So I don't know about the Nicky Rod thing. Your money would be, he's probably the favourite.
Yeah.
But I think watch out for Jimenez. He's another gi player. What I'd like is for all the gi players to win it again. Okay.
Well, this is going to be my next question, and I might not want to hear the answer to it. Do you think then everybody should be training in the gi and no gi?
I mean, I don't think you have to. Do what you enjoy doing. That's the problem. I think what you've got to get to the root is I don't really enjoy the gi. Why don't you enjoy it? Because you're not very fucking good at it. Because you do both, and you know what happened? You got really good at no gi much quicker. Do you know why? Because it's way less skillful. You know, like it's just a fact. Like I know now that if I was gonna roll with Braulio now, I'd have a much better chance of no-gi than I would in the gi. You're not going to touch him in the gi. You know, you're not going to have a because I know that rolling with someone like a Braulio, that there's going to come like a moment possibly where I'm going to create a bit of space, scramble, I can start diving in on a leg, and I can make something happen. Like, you spar with the greats in the gi, unless you're great yourself, there's just nothing you can do. Do you know what I mean? So you know, like you could see Nicky Rod in a gi against Braulio, he's going to look like a blue belt. Does that make sense? He's going to look like that level. Does that make sense? Whereas no-gi, he's going to be able to scramble and make a lot more action happen. You know, does that mean that no-gi's not skillful? No, it's ultra skillful, and it's got its own thing going on there. So no, you don't have to do both. I think I don't think you should be graded, and I do grade people that just do no-gi because I've got so many of them now that are doing it. But I don't think you should be graded if you don't do the gi. Like, I could take David Taylor, who, you know, Olympic gold medalist in wrestling, you know, 2-time world champion, like, you know, one of the best guys on planet Earth right now at wrestling. And I could put him in, and what, you think he's not going to take most judo black belts down? Like, fuck, of course he is. What if I put him in a gi? You still think he's not taking them down? Like, especially if we allow leg attacks. Like, of course he is. You know, judo pre-2008 or whenever they brought the stupid leg grab rule in. Like, he's going to take them all down. Of course he is. But is he a judo black belt? Do you see what I'm saying? Yeah. Like just because you can win. So, and I think you get away with so much more no-gi, and I think you lose critical skills as a jujitsu player and as a grappler. You know, do you necessarily need those if all you're going to do is sport no-gi jiu-jitsu? Possibly not. But are you a better jiu-jitsu player? And again, you're seeing this resurgence now of the gi player because they've got better overall jiu-jitsu. Because they've learned they can't just slip out of things. They've got to move out of things the right way, you know. And because of the DVD things, everybody's got access to the current technologies coming around. So it's just a case of, again, the better players are going to become, whereas before it was a case of they didn't know the technology, whereas now they do. They've got access to that knowledge. The better players are going to become the world champions. And the better players tend to be the gi players. Like, well, that's what we're seeing anyway. That's what we're seeing happening again as a trend. So from like 98, where, you know, you got to remember the original ADCCs were to try and bring in all the different grappling styles, but jiu-jitsu dominated, like heads and shoulders above everything else. And the rule set was supposed to be like a fair rule set, so the wrestlers had got a chance against but still jiu-jitsu dominated throughout the whole. And then we hit kind of 2015, and we had a little gap there where the specialists kind of dominated, and then we seem to be back now to doing it. So, you know, the data would suggest that training in the gi is good for both. So it is definitely personal choice. I don't think you should be graded if you don't train in the gi. I think everybody would benefit. I think if you think of it as a martial art, most of us are wearing clothes. It's much easier for me to choke you wearing a t-shirt than it is a gi, like legitimately. Like, so you've got to make your own decision, your own pathway. But yeah, that's where my take is on it.
Do you think there's any chance of the gi dying out?
It kind of already has. Like, I don't watch much gi now in terms of like no-gi is far more spectator friendly.
Yeah, well no-gi's on a massive rise, right?
Yeah.
If you talk to anybody, if you say to anybody, "Oh, I do jiu-jitsu," before they would think, "Oh, it's martial arts in the pajamas," as they'd say. But now, whenever I say to people, "Oh, I compete jiu-jitsu," they know what I'm talking about, and they've got the no-gi. They'll reference like something to do with no-gi. They've got that no-gi image in their mind. So obviously, it's no-gi that's rising really as.
Yeah, I mean, it should be called something else, like judo and wrestling are called totally different codes. Does that make sense? So, I think as a spectator sport, it kind of almost has already died out. I think the only way it's going to make a resurgence is if you get some players, you know, your Mika Galvaos that are finishing fights a lot, because nobody wants to watch a fight where, you know, the only thing to happen was an advantage. And I don't think the IBJJF rule set really encourages the direction that we want to take it. That's its biggest hindrance, is the way the rules are set up.
Right.
You know, you should be able to pull guard for a start. You know, why, if I take you down and land in side control, have I not got 5 points? Because if I take you down and land in your guard, it's the same 2 points. But then if I pass your guard, now I'm 5-0 up. That's stupid shit.
There's so many rules that don't make any sense to me.
Yeah, and especially in terms of the takedown, like how all takedowns absolutely are not the same. So why are all takedowns just awarded 2 points? You know, and you would just make it more spectator friendly. You know, and I think you would make it more functional as well. Like jiu-jitsu's weakness for years, and even my own weakness for years, was the standing exchanges. So as a grappler, that's the most important range for you to dominate, isn't it? So, but I think it is. But just because it's going to die out from a spectator's point, do I think you shouldn't train it? No, I think that's where people.
And you still have the hardcore fans, right? People that train it will watch it.
Yeah. And it was never really, you know. Like, I love watching gi jiu-jitsu, but I can understand how like the average person can enjoy no gi jiu-jitsu without really understanding it. It's just because it's spectator friendly, isn't it? But again, the rule sets have been, and people have been now rewarded for being an exciting grappler and things like that. I don't think the gi competitions do it. But there's no money involved in any of the gi competitions. Like, ibjjf don't pay their athletes, and that's a huge mistake. They need to start doing that as it will die out.
We've talked about the takedown game a lot, obviously how prominent that is. Do you think there are certain takedowns that people need to be good at, or is it going to be dependent on the individual as to what takedowns? No,
you definitely. There's definitely certain situations that are going to become. Again, it hasn't really happened yet, but so pre-2015, like, you would say, "Oh, go to Sambo to learn leg locks." You wouldn't say that now, would you? Like, everybody knows jiu-jitsu's got, like, without a doubt, the best leg locks. At the moment, people still go, "I'll go to judo and wrestling to learn takedowns." What I think will happen in the future is we will be able to take down world champion judo athletes and world, like, Olympic level wrestlers, but there's areas to specialize in that they don't. So the belly to back scenario, that's got to be an area of and essentially jiu-jitsu is just the sport of getting to someone's back. You know, you look at the statistics and you go like, wow, between 70 to 85% of all finishes, rear naked choke from the back. That's essentially all it is. So once you accept that, you go, well, it's a sport of getting to the back. So takedowns that expose their back rather than their back to the mat are going to be much more favourable. So anything where you can get to, so you've got to think, like, what I try and tell people now, and it's really improving everybody's standing grappling, is think like you're on the ground, but you've just flipped the floor up a little bit. You still want to get round the back. You don't actually need to take them down. Does that make sense? You know, so belly to back scenarios. Single legs, without a shadow of a doubt, you become a master of the single leg just because they're so much easier to attach onto. Get very comfortable with upper body ties. The really interesting thing, and it's bizarre, but it's because of the length of the matches, is when we do gi in BJJ, it looks more like wrestling, and you have people holding collars, bent over, looking like wrestlers. When we do no gi, we look more like judo players, and the judos become really popular. And like the ashiwaza kind of tends to happen more. And that's why someone like a Jimmy is a nightmare doing no-gi stand-up with, because it's like a judo battle essentially, where the judo guys struggle. And we're about to start up a no-gi judo class here, like its own takedown class, you know. And the judo guys here and the BJJ guys get to train together a little bit, but they all just try and do everything off a collar tie. You know, once the judo guys understand how to use underhooks and overhooks a little bit, they become like a nightmare again. Overnight almost, it's like, oh shit, now they've got a method of accessing all of their judo knowledge they didn't have when they were just holding the back of your neck type thing. So I think, single leg and absolutely master the belly to back scenario and movements that put you on their back. Does that make sense? So the arm drags and things like that are the obvious ones.
Duck unders?
Potentially. You've got to be careful with duck unders because the other thing with takedowns in jiu-jitsu is what we call back head exposure. So the back of your head, it's a little bit like it's reverse of what standing would be. So you come out in a boxing match and you do this, you're exposing. This is like the golden area. We don't really have Hail Mary submissions in jiu-jitsu. That's the great thing about it. Like, you have two heavyweight boxers, one's ranked 80th, one's ranked number 2. They've still got a puncher's chance. Fucking heavyweight boxers have got a puncher's chance. Like a swing and a hit and it's game over. That doesn't really exist in jiu-jitsu apart from the guillotine. So whenever you see a scenario where a lower level grappler beats a higher level grappler, it's almost always a fucking guillotine. And that's, again, like one of the scrambly things that nogi has that gi doesn't, you see. Scramble, get on the neck, squeeze the neck, guillotine. So things like duck unders, they are amazing, and so are double legs. But if you're ever exposing the back of your neck, you're opening up the only potential puncher's chance there are. Like if I've ever been caught by someone of a lower grade that has got no business tapping me out, it'll be because of a guillotine.
Not a leg lock.
No.
Yeah, not you, of course.
No, not with anybody. Like okay. the lucky leg lock only happened because of the skill discrepancy. And this is where the belt bullshit comes in again, because just because somebody's a black belt, if you haven't done your homework and upgraded to like I love it when people attack my legs. Like, that's perfect for me because my leg lock defense is on point. I'm pretty good at defending leg locks. So if you're going to leg lock me, it's not a lucky leg lock. It's because you are very, very skillful at leg locks. You know, for your leg locking ability to be able to my leg lock defense, then that's not fucking lucky. You're really good at leg locks. I've never been lucky leg locked in my life, you know, until like post. But it did happen initially. Like Tom Corhay was spending time with like Tarza and Breeze, who was like literally sleeping in Gordon's house at the time before Gordon became super famous. And I remember Tom coming back and catching me in loads of leg locks, but just 'cause I didn't know her. Does that make sense? But I do know the guillotine, but you can still get caught with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Anything that exposes the back of the head is risky business.
Quick fire questions then.
Okay.
To finish. Top 3 gi players of all time, top 3 no gi players of all time.
So top 3 in the gi. So Roger, without a shadow of a doubt. Who do I say? I'll probably go Marcelo. I'll put him in there in the gi. And probably someone like a Rafa Mendes, someone like that, for gi. But I mean, that's I hate of all time because your modern grapplers are always going to be better. Do you know what I mean? Like Tynan's probably better than Rafa now, but Tynan wouldn't be better than Rafa if it wasn't for Rafa coaching him and teaching him everything. Do you know what I mean? So that's probably my 3 in the gi. You have to obviously Hodges the GOAT, isn't he? No gi again. The GOAT's easy. We all know it's Gordon. Then it gets a bit tricky. I'd say Marcelo, Gordon again. Marcelo definitely number 2. I mean, I'd probably give it Andre Galvin just on titles, but he's not my favourite. Like, it's not my top 3 favourite, but I'd probably give it to Andre. If I was putting my favourite there, I'd probably put someone like Craig there. But Craig's nowhere near the top 3 of all time. If you watch what Kynan did to him, like, you know.
Final finishing question: you don't have to sell me on it, but sell someone on jiu-jitsu. What's jiu-jitsu done for you, as opposed to just being a sport that you enjoy learning and enjoy competing? Why should people do jiu-jitsu?
So I think in terms of like mental health or something like that, I think, and this is not just me, but it's from just thousands of people saying the same thing. I think it's literally like an immersive video game. There's no other sport that immerses you into it straight away like that. So you can go and play tennis, you play those things, you know. There's just nothing that's going to put you, like, take you out of whatever worries you've got going on in your life, like the way that jiu-jitsu is. You know, it's literally like a drug, and you can see why people get hooked on it real quick. You know, once you're rolling and you're jostling and exchanging, you know, you've got all of the complexities of a game like chess occurring, but all of the physicality of something like wrestling occurring at the same time. It's like the perfect blend of this cognitive and physical thing that, because of the fact that it is like so much cognitive load, so much physical load, all blended into one, there's no resting things to be going like, oh, I wonder what I'm going to have for tea tonight, and like I need to get those bills paid, and how am I going to, like, that's all gone. So I think, you know, we know categorically that exercise is the number 1 thing for mental health, but it can be boring at times. You know, it's like you know, I love training in the gym, but I also like don't look forward to doing it. I'm like, oh, I've got to go and work out. You know?
It can be lonely, right? Oftentimes you'll be doing it by yourself.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and that is the worst, and it's hard, and it's, you know. So I love the feeling after it, but the idea when I'm sat there and going like, I'll put it off and I'll procrastinate and be like, I've got to get my workout in, and I don't want. Do you know what I mean? I feel great afterwards, whereas I never get that with jiu-jitsu. Like, people are excited to go to jiu-jitsu, you know. So. Yeah.
No, I absolutely agree.
The immersive video game. Awesome, Aaron. Thank you very much, mate.